to welcome you all to this really historic event.
It is my hope that women all over the world may profit from the work you do, and that they may feel that it concerns them directly, and that you care for their welfare and for that of all mankind.
Women are the first victims of the mass removals of the African people into the Bantustans.
The founding of the United Nations after the Second World War and the emergence of independent states following decolonization were important events in the political, economic, and social liberation of women. Commitment to the advancement of women began with the signing of the United Nations Charter in 1945. In 1946, the Commission on the Status of Women was established to promote the advancement of women throughout the world. By the mid-1960s, the Commission had begun to address women's role in economic and social development.
We had issues of non-participation, not counting women's work. Because if you don't count it, it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist in your numbers, it cannot be rewarded. And of course, if it's not rewarded, it becomes marginalized.
Recognition and removal of such violence is essential towards the recognition.
Following the 1975 World Conference on Women in Mexico City, the UN General Assembly in its Resolution 3520 proclaimed 1976 to 1985 as the United Nations Decade for Women. This and subsequent World Conferences on Women created exceptional momentum for change.
The period between 1975 and 1985 was a period of great organizing, a period of looking deeply into the issues of women, their roles, their responsibilities. The time was significant in terms of the fact that it gave statistical recognition or scientific recognition to the productive roles of women. We not only had to be organized, we had to be talking to each other. It was important to be involved in those conversations and to make sure that economists and planners understood the importance of including women and paying special attention to the needs of women and putting money on it. That was very crucial. They didn't understand things like that, you see.
It is significant that the end of the Decade Conference should take place in this beautiful country of Africa, where many of the challenges and hopes for the future of developing countries are crystallized.
The end of the Women's Decade Conference of 1985 brought the spirit of greater organizing to Kampala with a call to deepening action. The Nairobi forward-looking strategies sought innovative ways of overcoming obstacles for achieving the objectives of the decade theme, equality, development, and peace.
The beauty of the forward-looking strategies is that then women's issues were not, dealt with as single incidents of marginalization, but as holistic issues of marginalization. And they provided space for everyone. Everyone had room to do something to reduce disempowerment of women.
In preparation for the Fourth World Conference, women from the East African region convened in Kampala, Uganda for the East African Women's Preparatory Conference. Shared experiences brought to light the dire need for joint action, continued networking, and information sharing among women's organizations.
We decided to do a situation analysis. That was like our presentation in the East African Women's Conference, and actually that presentation informed our mandate.
Organizations like FIDA, Women's Finance and Credit Trust, among others, re-energized themselves as local chapters, while homegrown organizations sprang up to start the process of implementing the Nairobi forward-looking strategies.
We found ourselves, as we mobilized for gender equality and women's empowerment, we found that there are certain issues which were of common interest to each of the organizations. So we said, instead of each organization going alone on this issue of commonality, let us form a network of these national women's non-governmental organizations so that we can coordinate properly.
The motivation at the time was for women to embrace the challenge of dealing with strategic concerns related to policy, power, social and economic transformation of women, and push for gender equality on the local scene.
Uganda Women's Network was like a pace setter for networking among women and among other bodies. When we formed the Uganda Women's Network in 1993, we decided that the first issue we are going to work on was women and the economy. We felt that these are areas where we needed to focus so that we can, address some of the constraints to women's empowerment.
The Fourth World Conference on Women must elicit commitments to action, coupled with commitments of resources. This is the mission in Beijing. No further analysis, but a deeper level of action.
Coming back from Beijing, the renewed passion to move the network's mandate needed to be approached with a compound strength of intellect and valued instinct. Because at the time, there were several issues on several fronts which required urgent attention. UWONET chose to deepen its level of action in the following areas: women's access to power and decision-making, improve the socio-economic condition of women, equal opportunities and rights of women in all sectors, and increased access and control of resources and benefits in all sectors, eliminate violence against women and defilement, disseminate information on the priority areas of issues of concern to women. With a clear mandate, the network began on its journey of becoming a household name in contemporary Uganda. It must, however, be noted that the struggle to emancipate women in Uganda has long been in motion, dating as far back as the early 1940s. Secular women's groups such as the Women's League of 1945, which became the Uganda Council of Women in 1946, were instrumental in enabling important events like the 1960 Conference on the Status of Women.
On International Women's Day, the women of Uganda spoke with one voice and spoke with responsibility. They asked for a united effort by men and women for the rehabilitation and reconstruction of a new Uganda. Mr. Speaker, the government accepts that message.
And so, actions of Uganda Women's Network today is a reaffirmation and enhancement of earlier women's initiatives.
What is very important is that every wave should recognize what the wave before them did. And so that's why I think it's very important that we should never be caught saying that the NRM came and gave women power in Uganda. This is not correct. Women have been working for their own empowerment in Uganda since day one.
The task to unpack the broad conceptual framework of women and the economy began with the move to engage the effects of structural adjustment program and debt.
We did a study in West Nile and identified those issues of related structural adjustment that were affecting women. And we brought this into a national conference, which UWONET hosted.
At the time, standardized policy packages that were introduced by the World Bank and International Monetary Fund for highly indebted third world economies in the 1980s and 90s called for slashing government spending, privatization, and opening up countries to foreign investment, among other measures. These recommendations were directly affecting women,
especially in the area of health, and in the area of education, and in the area of economic empowerment. So I'm talking about the poverty that women are going through, raising children in Uganda, how children were not going to school, how health facilities were dilapidated and even getting worse. because of structure adjustment and debt.
The active participation of UWONET in this campaign subsequently contributed to Uganda's debt relief, amounting to $1 billion in April 1998 and 2000 respectively. Substantial cash savings were realized, an average $60 million per annum over a 4-year period, accounting for almost a quarter of the total budget support over that period. However, the struggle to overcome the debt burden for Uganda was still far from over, and so, to ensure progress on the debt relief discourse, UWONET supported the growth of Uganda Debt Network.
Those initial campaigns that UWONET participated in Europe, that really also sparked off the idea of starting a debt network in Uganda.
Land being an important factor of production, women and land rights advocacy in Uganda was instrumental in shifting the discourse around the 1998 Land Act. To concentrate advocacy on issues highlighted by research and enable continued flow of information about subsequent land rights advocacy efforts, UWONET supported the formation of Uganda Land Alliance.
The argument we've made for a long time is that if you secure a women's land rights, then you secure productivity, you secure longevity, you secure family incomes, and that's what we've been working for and around as a government. So you can't want to increase family incomes without securing the place of a woman on her land.
Are we moving forward? Yes, we moved a step forward by legislating and moved 5 steps back in terms of land services delivery, land justice resolution. So the intentions in the law are not actually then being realized in practice. And this creates a big problem and a big gap.
Signify the beginning of a new era in Uganda's politics. An era which recognizes equal opportunity for candidates, irrespective of gender. An era in which the method of elections, whether by the secret ballot or by the initial resistance council system of lining up behind the chosen candidate, whatever, is the method not determined by gender? Or is it an era in which, in spite of the affirmative action, the odds are still weighted heavily against women?
As a country, Uganda was in the process of drafting the 1995 Constitution. There couldn't have been a more opportune moment to engage in the key issues of women's participation in leadership and decision-making processes. Behind the scenes, the network worked hard to support the caucus through lobbying, research, and providing information on issues affecting women, securing what has been deemed the most gender-sensitive constitution of the time.
These caucuses were very instrumental in ensuring that the positions of women or the issues that women were interested in were actually lobbied for.
Over 40 gender-sensitive articles were entrenched in the 1995 Constitution. And that was the first time that a good number of women became visible on the national political arena. So that was very significant for us as women.
The debate to return Uganda to a multi-party political dispensation system was ongoing. A referendum had been scheduled, and it was therefore strategically sensible for the network to carry out much-needed civic education.
As we campaigned for the restoration of multi-party politics in Uganda, one of the key avenues we used was making use of the media. We were very active, we moved around, used the media to sensitize Ugandans about their rights, their political rights. But we also went out and physically reached out to various groups all across the country, training them on what it takes. It's not enough for you to be called upon to vote, but you also need to know what you're voting for and for what purpose, and how do you take charge of your own leadership.
For women, a strong multi-party democracy is important in ensuring a platform for policy options for women to participate and engage in issues of governance, freedom of association and expression. This became more evident during the debate on the bill for minimum education requirements for leadership positions, particularly at the local government level.
That when lies are told many times, sometimes they start sounding like the truth.
It had been observed that legislators were not effectively consulting with their constituents.
There was a heated discussion when parliamentarians were actually saying, how did this bill get to us when we did not look at the issues on the ground? Why didn't, for example, the Law Reform Commission or even the Minister of Education tell us that as far as Ugandans are concerned, Ugandan women are concerned, these are the statistics. So if you're going to say the minimum requirement is advanced level, you'd would hardly get, a handful of women participating in the local government level.
Technically, the passing of this bill at the time would undermine women's efforts enshrined in Articles 32 and 33 of the 1995 Constitution. It took the network's active lobbying to get Parliament to return to the electorate for further consultations.
I see a difference in people actually taking the issue of consulting very seriously, because what happened then was that some MPs actually came back and reported what the status was in their particular districts from an informed position, So for me, that was, and I don't think ever since then we've ever had as Uganda Women's Network where we have had serious consultations on a key issue where people actually, their views were actually sought.
I've met with a lot of hostility, a lot of people asking me to stand down in favor of a male candidate, which I don't agree with.
On the political front, the implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, was taken a step further when UWONET compiled the first Women's Manifesto prior to the 1996 elections. This document was used to influence the manifestos of the presidential and parliamentary candidates' elections, as provided for in the 1995 Constitution.
Yes, Kelly's Pamma, a duly nominated candidate for the councillorship of Mutumbe 2 electoral area in the Mutumbe parish in Rubaga division.
UWONET introduced the gender monitoring concept with the aim of observing elections, looking at women's participation and their hindrances to participation in the cycle of elections